culture, sports. PCN is your place for Pennsylvania, on cable and on the PCN app.
Watch PCN's coverage of Pennsylvania politics and policy, history and culture, sports, and more with the PCN app. Stream live events and video on demand in HD from your favorite device. Go to PCNTV.com to start streaming today.
Join our guests for insights on issues impacting local government and the citizens of Pennsylvania. Created by the Pennsylvania State Association of Boroughs, Inside Pennsylvania Boroughs connects you to legislation and policy that will affect you and your family. Your host, Chris Kapp, and his guests discuss current affairs that matter to you most. Connect with your state by tuning into Inside Pennsylvania Boroughs on Sundays here on PCN.
Pennsylvania's 956 boroughs each offer something unique to the Commonwealth. They are filled with culture, commerce, and history. Join PCN and the Pennsylvania State Association of Boroughs each month as we journey around the state in Exploring Pennsylvania Boroughs. Go to PCNTV.com for more details.
Today's event. Governor Tom Wolf, Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar, and Philadelphia City Commissioner Al Schmidt. After remarks conclude, we will open up the call for reporters to ask questions in the order in which you RSVP'd. You will see the on-deck reporter in the chat feature, and I will announce the name of the reporter to ask their question. Please remember to mute yourself after your question has been answered. Please do not use the chat feature to ask questions, as we will not be answering questions via chat. We do have dozens of reporters on today's call, and we will get to as many as we can. We will begin with Governor Tom Wolf.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome, Commissioner Schmidt and Secretary Boockvar. It's always good to have you here. Later today, Republican members of the Pennsylvania congressional delegation evidently plan to object to the counting of Pennsylvania's electoral votes. They claim to believe that Pennsylvania's election was compromised and that our electoral votes are suspect. This, of course, is a shameful lie. The very democracy these lawmakers swore an oath to uphold is at risk here. Every member of the United States House of Representatives was elected in the general election this past November. By questioning the results of the presidential election, these lawmakers are questioning the legitimacy of their own elections as well. These lawmakers cannot, in good faith, claim to believe something that has been disproved directly and repeatedly by the courts. And they, by the way, that's state and federal courts. And they could not have taken their own seats in Congress in good conscience if they truly believed the election results were inaccurate, which just leaves one possibility: that they are purposely spreading disinformation about our elections for personal political gain. That's shameful, and that's destructive, and I cannot let it stand unchallenged. By spreading myths and telling lies about our elections and the hardworking county election officials who administer them, these lawmakers are damaging the trust Pennsylvanians have in their elections, in their election officials, and in their government. The problem is these folks are not telling the truth, because it's a fact. Pennsylvania had a fair and free election. It's a fact that there was no fraud or illegal activity in Pennsylvania. It's a fact that Joe Biden won the presidency And to be clear, it wasn't even close. Joe Biden won the election by 7 million votes across the United States. He won the Electoral College by the same margin Donald Trump did 4 years ago, and he nearly doubled the Trump margin of victory in Pennsylvania. Across the country, state and federal judges, including many Republican appointees, have extensively reviewed allegations of fraud in the general election and repeatedly dismissed them as untrue. The Trump campaign has lost more than 60 court cases because there is simply no evidence that fraud occurred during the election or while these votes were being counted. Fact checkers, election administration experts have also independently debunked these false accusations. Even Trump administration officials have spoken up to tell the truth. President Trump's former Attorney General, Bill Barr, confirmed there was no widespread fraud. Chris Krebs, who oversaw election cybersecurity for the Trump administration, said this election was the most secure in United States history. Pennsylvania election officials, volunteers, and voters of both parties worked hard to make this a safe and secure election. Republican lawmakers cannot change the facts just because they don't like them. These actions damage the very institutions that allow our nation to have a free and fair election system, that allow us to have a peaceful transition of power when an elected official leaves office. They're disrespectful to the American people who exercised their rights to vote in this election and to the patriots who fought and died for our democracy. A little over 157 years ago, President Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, made a speech that said it much better than I can. In a little Pennsylvania town, Gettysburg, just a few miles southwest of here, he reaffirmed the reason why the soldiers at the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War fought and died. He reminded us that the democratic principles for which they died were absolutely central to the promise of America. The ceremony was intended to consecrate the cemetery in which the soldiers who died in the Battle of Gettysburg were laid to rest. But as Lincoln pointed out, the people who really consecrated that battlefield, the brave men, living and dead, who struggled there, they were the ones who consecrated it. He said it was for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated to the unfinished work for which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish. His point, of course, was that the arguments, debates, and ideas that give life to the act of governing in a democracy like ours cannot be separated from the system within which that governing takes place. Democracy is a perpetual experiment, empowering ordinary citizens, not kings, not emperors, to direct their government. Thus, a central responsibility of every public servant, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative, in the United States is to make sure our citizens retain that power. Sadly, here in Pennsylvania yesterday, and evidently today, later today in Washington, some of our public servants have seemed to have forgotten that. As a result, government of the people, by the people, and for the people is really taking a hit. Now I'm proud to turn this over to Secretary Kathy Boockvar. Secretary Boockvar.
Thank you, Governor. Sorry, it's not recognizing my Face ID. Good afternoon. Happy New Year. Thank you very much, Governor Wolf, and thank you, Commissioner Schmidt, for being here. In November's election, 100 years and 1 day after American women voted for the very first time, we were extremely proud of the record voter participation in the Commonwealth. Pennsylvania had held a fair, free, secure, and accessible election for eligible Pennsylvanians with exceptional transparency throughout the entire process. Once again, I want to give tremendous thanks to all the election officials and poll workers, Republicans and Democrats, who worked tirelessly amidst a global pandemic so that eligible voters could exercise their fundamental right to vote and decide this election. And they did in record numbers. Act 77 of 2019 and Act 12 of 2020 made the most extensive changes in more than 80 years in the Commonwealth to how voters vote in Pennsylvania and how we run elections in Pennsylvania, including longer voter registration periods, no-excuse mail-in voting, and more. Local and state election officials implemented all these changes in the face of a global pandemic, delivery delays acknowledged by the U.S. Postal Service itself, and an unprecedented amount of false litigation and challenges brought throughout the year. Despite all these challenges, Pennsylvanians registered and voted in record numbers in 2020. Approximately 9.1 million Pennsylvanians are registered to vote, more than 300,000 more voters than ever before. And turnout in the November election included more than 6.9 million voters, 800,000 more Pennsylvanians than ever in our history. Over 76% of registered Pennsylvanians voted, far more than ever before. And those votes were counted accurately and securely by the counties, no matter whether you voted in person on Election Day, by mail, or early at your county election office. I say this with supreme confidence because our counties have some of the most dedicated, hardworking, professional election officials in the country. Here's one with us today. And our Commonwealth has become a pioneer in election security and integrity. Pennsylvania's 67 county boards of election worked incredibly hard around the clock in collaboration with the Department of State, with PEMA, with state and federal offices of Homeland Security, the offices of Information Technology, information security officers, Pennsylvania State Police, Pennsylvania National Guard, DMVA, and other key local, state, and federal partners to ensure the highest level of security and integrity of Pennsylvania's election processes. A layered set of defenses are in place in the Commonwealth to protect every step of the process, including cybersecurity protections, extensive eligibility checking procedures, and state-of-the-art voting systems that meet stringent federal and state standards for security and accessibility, and provide an auditable, voter-verifiable paper ballot for every voter in the Commonwealth. In addition, in order to vote by mail in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvanians must apply and be approved. They go through extensive ID checking. They need to provide their driver's license or the last four of their social security numbers. They also have to check against the voter record to make sure that they're eligible voters. And then once the ballot is sent in by the voter, another round of checking is done to make sure that the voter actually was on the list of approved mail-in voters. The voter needs to sign an oath under penalty of perjury, and the entire process is secure. Additionally, every single voting system in the state have successfully completed penetration testing, access control testing, and testing to ensure that every access point, software, and firmware are protected from tampering and no voting system is connected to the internet. Pennsylvania processes also ensure that no voter is wrongly disenfranchised and every single qualified vote is counted. That takes some time. Before counties certify their results to the department, they are required by statute also to conduct an audit of a random sample of at least 2% or 2,000 of their ballots. Additionally, Pennsylvania was one of the first states in the nation to pilot additional voluntary audits on top of what they're already required by statute. They've been conducting pilots of the risk limiting audit, and Philadelphia was one of the first two counties in the state to pilot the security measure in 2019. We went on to pilot some statewide risk limiting audits in 2020, and these are scientifically designed procedures using statistical methods to provide a high level of confidence and statistical verification that the outcome of an election is accurate and to detect possible interference. The department and counties are currently conducting another statewide risk limiting audit pilot of the 2020 presidential election, as we did after the primary. With everything our country and Commonwealth has faced this year, we are reminded more than ever why we must fight any effort to undermine our great democracy. Thank you to everyone who exercised their precious right to vote, and thank you again to all our election officials and poll workers for tirelessly carrying out the democratic processes so that the will of the voters, as expressed in November and then certified and voted again by the Electoral College in December, may be heard and carried out. And now I'd like to introduce Philadelphia Commissioner Al Schmidt.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor Wolf and Secretary Boockvar, for inviting me to be with you here today. All Pennsylvanians should have confidence in the election results in Philadelphia. We had the most transparent and secure election in the history of our city. Our dedicated election workers demonstrated determination and integrity in counting every valid vote cast by eligible voters on or before Election Day, and did so under unprecedented circumstances. Every vote cast and counted in Philadelphia had a voter verifiable paper ballot record, and the canvass of those ballots was live streamed and fully open to observers of all parties. Our republic is better when we all have the opportunity to participate. And as public servants, it's our duty to put aside partisan political interests to serve our constituents. In a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, we were able to provide safe, in-person voting and a convenient and safe vote-by-mail option. I'm proud to say that Philadelphia had its highest turnout in more than 30 years. Even with this significant turnout, in the many lawsuits filed in Pennsylvania, there wasn't a single challenge on the basis of a voter's eligibility to cast their vote in Philadelphia. At the heart of our electoral system is the faith Americans have in the integrity of our elections. Confidence that we do everything we can to count legitimately cast votes from eligible voters, and trust that we do everything in our power to protect our elections from illegitimately cast votes. Now is the time to come together and to continue to improve our electoral system and restore that faith. We must do so based on facts and informed by data, rejecting disinformation, and with the understanding that this past election in Pennsylvania was free and fair. Governor. Thank
you. Okay, we will now begin the Q&A portion of our press conference. Please keep an eye on the chat feature as you will see the reporter who is to ask their question and the reporter who is on deck. On deck, we have Tyler from WLVR, and our reporter now is Boris from the Scranton Times-Tribune. Boris, please unmute and ask your question.
I'm sorry, I don't have a question. Thank you.
Okay, Tyler, please unmute and ask your question.
Good afternoon. My question is for the governor. Governor Wolf, as we just heard detailed by Secretary Boockvar and Commissioner Schmidt, the ways that Pennsylvania held a free and fair election, you pointed your comments at lawmakers. What would you say to the American people and Pennsylvanians that continue to believe that Pennsylvania's election was fraudulent?
They're wrong. And I would also suggest to the people who are fomenting this disinformation and trying to make people believe against all reality and all the facts that the elections were not free and fair, that they ought to stop doing that.
Okay, our next question is from Dennis Owens from ABC 27. Dennis, please unmute.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for doing this. Governor, actually, my question, and I know the drama's in Washington, D.C. today, but my question's for Kathy Boockvar regarding the state Senate race in Western Pennsylvania. And Secretary Boockvar, we're told that your guidance before the election was that mail-in ballots that did not have a date, that is, the voter didn't sign and date the mail-in ballot, should be set aside and voided. You have a district with 2 counties, Westmoreland and Allegheny, one of which tossed them and the other one's keeping them. If those mail-in ballots that didn't have dates are counted, one person wins. If they're not, another person wins. Obviously, a testament to every vote counting, of course. But what can you say about people saying that your own guidance was to dismiss those ballots, and but you've now certified an election in which a county chose to keep those mail-in ballots that didn't have dates on them. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Sure, Dennis. Happy New Year to you as well. So, as you know, this is a circumstance that has been before the federal courts and the state courts. The Department of State's role in this is actually very simple. The counties certify their votes. They provide them to the Department of State. You could look in the statute. The statute says Department of State receives the votes from the counties, and then we certify based on the county certifications. One of the candidates in this case, the losing candidate, did ask the court to enjoin us from certifying the results of that election. The court denied that, Dennis. And so it's very simple. The counties provide us their certifications. We have a duty to then certify the elections. The winner in this race, based on those certifications, was Senator Brewster, and we certified that race at the same time we certified all the races. So that's the simple fact of the matter, and the courts, are still active, and we'll decide it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Our next question is from Ryan from CBS 21. Ryan, please unmute.
Secretary Boockvar, my question is for you. Really, I have two. The first question is, we haven't heard from you in, I want to say, almost 2 months. Why has it been that long since you've been part of one of these press conferences?
Well, actually, I don't think we've done any election press conferences in 2 months. So it's been as simple as, look, the counting was going on and the counties were doing their job. We were providing support to the counties to make sure they could get all their work done. I was very honored to preside over the Electoral College in December. Hopefully you had a chance to see that. But we really were letting the process take its course. So, Governor, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was 2 months, but the election process, we have a court system, and the court system was obviously used by all kinds of folks in this process, and I think that's where the action was. It was not anything that we had anything to do with. So I think that's why it has been that long. Today, things are happening in the political arena, and I think call for us to say something.
Governor, while I have you two, I had a question. Republicans had sent a letter to U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell suggesting that the administration had ignored calls for independent investigations regarding the election. Did you ever see any requests for an independent investigation, and were those ignored? Is that your understanding?
I didn't see any. Did you see? No, I don't know what they're talking about.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question is from Jim from KYW News Radio. Jim, please unmute and ask your question.
Just a quick follow-up for Secretary Boockvar. Understanding the certification by the county and then the certification by the state and then the rulings by the courts, but the question has been the guidance beforehand. Was there guidance specifically related to dates on mail-in ballots that went out before Election Day?
You can look at all the guidance is public and posted on our website. So you could look, there were multiple, as you know, there was, and as the governor mentioned, and I think as Commissioner Schmidt mentioned, and I mentioned, there's been unprecedented litigation throughout the year. So throughout the year, we provided guidance to the best of the court's guidance. And actually, a lot of the litigation, both in federal court and state court, actually said that the guidance was critically important and upheld their decisions based on the guidance that was put out. So I don't know the exact allegations here. Please feel free to go onto the website, check out the guidance. We continuously update it based on those court decisions and provided that guidance to every single one of the counties on a uniform basis. The counties, all the other counties in the state seem to have followed it just fine, and the legal process allows for challenges. So several of the counties experienced those challenges from the candidates or the parties, and they went through that process, and that's what those processes are there for, to do that. So again, we had a free and fair elections with all the counties and the candidates being able to follow those rules, and in the result of the will of the people where we are today.
Thank you, Jim. Our next question is from Carrie from the Center for Public Integrity. Carrie, please unmute.
Hi, thanks very much for taking my question. It's really for the Secretary and for Commissioner Schmidt. In the wake of this election, there's been a lot of talk about the legislature making additional changes to voting procedures, especially to vote by mail for Pennsylvania. And I'd like to ask you both, what you see as the next steps with this, how you're working with the legislature, and what feedback you would give them about what would and wouldn't be a helpful change. What would you like to see happen, given the lessons learned of the 2020 election?
So for me, and Al and I haven't had this discussion yet, but the top priority for us, I would say, is, still the pre-canvassing, which was shown throughout the process of the election that it takes longer than 13 hours on election day to actually pre-process the mail-in and absentee ballots when you're looking at millions of ballots. So the counties were phenomenal, worked around the clock to get it done, but 46 other states in this country provide their counties with weeks of time ahead of Election Day to pre-canvass those ballots. That's our single biggest priority on the elections front, to help the counties effectively administer the elections. And I'll defer to you, Commissioner.
I wholeheartedly agree with the Secretary. Pre-canvassing is critical, not just in the processing of votes, but in helping to, maintain and restore the integrity of the process. I think it was difficult for our county and many counties to feel like the legislature and others were putting their foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. They wanted results like that, but were unwilling to give the counties what they needed to begin preparing those ballots and those declaration envelopes for processing, so that we could begin reporting those results on Election Day, on election morning, in fact. I think there'll be other things as well, and I know our county and other counties will be reaching out to the governor's office and to the secretary moving forward with regard to improvements to the electoral process.
Thank you, Carrie. Our next question is from Asha from the Pennsylvania Legislative Services. Please unmute and ask your question.
My question's for Governor Wolf, and it's kind of related to that last one. I think the fact that, we're at this press conference right now really underscores that this was a really tense election cycle in Pennsylvania. And, in addition to that, it was also the first election year where we had Act 77 and mail-in balloting in place. So looking forward, it does seem like some lawmakers in the General Assembly are interested in revisiting the topic of mail-in ballots legislatively, maybe addressing pre-canvassing, but also perhaps adding more requirements or rolling back pieces of Act 77. So I guess what I would ask is, what long-term effects, if any, do you think that the disagreements and tension we've seen over this election will have on how you approach your conversations in collaboration with the legislature on the issue moving forward? And also, is there any scenario where you would sign legislation rolling back any portions of Act 77?
Well, let's keep in mind that the Act 77 electoral reform was a bipartisan measure. It came out of a General Assembly where the Republican Party had the majority in both the House and the Senate. And I think we need to remember that. And I think it was great. I signed it willingly because we moved forward in terms of making voting more accessible and easier for Pennsylvanians. And I think the results were that more people came out to vote. We did what you're supposed to do in a democracy, and that's regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I noticed, interestingly enough, that coming out of 2019, we all seem to be on the same page. There was a lot of talk about pre-canvassing, about extending that period. And counties, Republican and Democratic counties, were interested in having that done so that they could be ready to count the ballots and do it in a more timely basis. I think it's interesting right now in Georgia, I think they have a 2-week pre-canvassing period. And so the election results are being reported in a very timely fashion. So I'd like to see that kind of thing. I'm not sure what you're talking about in terms of other things that might or might not be in election reform. But if the question is, do I think that we can make it better? I do. And I'm hoping that we can do the same way we did it before, in a very bipartisan way. I think this was obviously a tough election, and I think there were some issues that were raised, unfortunately, in 2020 about the system itself, which I think is unfortunate, because I think it drew attention and raised questions about the democratic process in general. And I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. I think we all know we can make the democratic process better, which is what Act 77 tried to do. I don't know how what we're doing now, which is destructive to the democratic system, is in any way helpful. So I'm hoping we can get back on the same page. We can all work together and say, let's forget the fact that we might have different ideas and we might argue about specific policies, but we all have a vested interest, a shared interest in a strong and healthy democracy.
Okay, we're going to continue along. Our next question is from Tom from WGAL. Tom, please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. You talked a lot about what you believe to be misinformation, but beyond that, what else do you think the state can do to either improve transparency or offer, I guess, more of a way for people to trust the results? And I say this for the people who reach out to us on a daily basis saying they don't trust what happened. Is there anything that you believe the state can do even further to improve, reach out to those people?
I don't know, and I'm not sure it's misinformation. It's absolutely disinformation. I think it's an attempt to actually mislead people. It's not accidental. It's not just random bits of information. It's being done on a conscious basis, and I think that has undermined the system. So yeah, I agree. There are people out there who have been led to believe by unscrupulous politicians that a system that we have done everything to make as free and fair and open and transparent as we possibly could, that still there are people who claim that things aren't right. Now, if that were true, I mean, this has gone through now months of court cases. It has been challenged. Where's the evidence? What is it that is wrong here? And if there's something wrong, I think we've shown every inclination, every willingness to open up and do anything we can to make this more fair, more open, more transparent. But I'm at a loss to understand what more we could do.
Okay, our next question is from John Delano from KDKA. John, please unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Happy New Year, Governor. Happy New Year, Secretary Boockvar.
Happy New Year, John.
Let me ask you this question, and you may have answered it in some ways, but as you know, when Pennsylvania's name is called and the Electoral College votes are expected to be read, and that may happen in the wee hours tomorrow morning, we're going to see 8 of the 9 Pennsylvania Republican congressmen object to that vote. Some have said that they are violating their oath of office, that they're engaged in treasonous activities. Sedition has been tossed out there. Governor, how would you characterize the actions of these particular Pennsylvania members of Congress?
Well, it's inconsistent at best. I mean, each of them was elected according to the rules that they're apparently saying that they don't agree with. And as I said in my comments, I don't understand how you can do that. Are you saying I didn't like this particular election, not because of the way it was handled, because I was elected the same way, but because of who the voters voted for? Well, that's pretty dangerous when you start getting into that area in terms of a democracy. If you're saying that because I don't like the outcome of a game, because I don't like the outcome of this election, I'm going to arbitrarily and unilaterally change it. What does that say about a democratic system that is at foundation based on the ability of each individual citizen to vote and direct and hire the people they want to hire? Are you taking that away from the voters? I don't know what I would call it except basically inconsistent. It's inconsistent with their own interests. It's inconsistent with their own election. It's inconsistent with the way democracy is intended to work. It's puzzling.
Thank you, John. Our next question will be from Mark Scarfaro from the Associated Press. Please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Governor, Secretary, and Commissioner. My question has to do with Act 77. So much of the litigation had to do with the envelope, the declaration, the name, the date, write your name. How much of that could be changed outside of legislation? Are you considering changing it? And do you support making changes to those details through legislation? Do you think these kinds of changes would be a good thing or a bad thing? And do you think they might help avoid the type of flood of litigation that we've experienced in the last few months?
Let me turn that over to Secretary Boockvar.
Hi, Mark. How are you? So I would say this. I think what was interesting about the court decisions in that case, even for the provisions that were not new, it just had never actually risen to the point of being challenged in court before. So clearly, there were questions about interpretation of it, and I think that we would say that anything that can clarify is helpful, right? So that the counties understand what the statute requires and doesn't require, and that the voters can understand what requires and what isn't required. Having said that, I think I could also speak for us in that we will always seek to ensure that no eligible voter is disenfranchised unfairly. And so I think the follow-up question would be, will we be able to come to an agreement about how to clarify it? And I would hope that there would be ability to do that. But I think there's no question that having laws, and frankly, one of the federal court judges who issued a decision earlier on in the fall specifically said that my guidance filled gaps that the legislature had left open. So look, I think we know that statutes are an imperfect vehicle, and that the how and the why, how it's done always helps to clarify. So I think we're always open to further clarification.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That was our last question for today. As a reminder, video of today's press conference will be available via PAcast. Thank you to the governor and our other speakers for their time, and we appreciate the media joining us. Have a great day.